Purdue fans. This is Johnny DeCamp bringing you play-by-play the rousing...
Hi, everybody, along with Ron Kramer, this is Pete Van Weeren welcoming you to Ross-Ade Stadium.
Live from Ross-Ade Stadium in West Lafayette, Indiana.
It's a football Saturday in West Lafayette, Indiana, and one of the biggest home games in decades.
Boilermakers rush the field. What a night in West Lafayette.
Your Central Indiana Ford dealers are a proud sponsor of Purdue football and the Ross-Ade's Greatest Games podcast. Visit your local Central Indiana Ford dealer today.
Welcome to the Ross-Ade's Greatest Games podcast. I'm Corey Palm. He's Tim Newton, and we are here to celebrate the 100th year of football inside Ross-Ade Stadium, the home of the Boilermakers, by counting down some of the all-time great games played in that stadium. A few rules before we get started. This list is not comprehensive. We're going to do the best we can to cover as much ground as we can, but there's more games than we have time available. And also, we're not going to rank these games. They are being presented in chronological order, and we've made our way all the way up to the 1979 season. Tim, one of the best seasons in program history. So it's appropriate that we're doing a couple different games from that year. Today, we're going to talk about the win over Michigan.
Yeah, it's the only 10-win season in Purdue history. Although we were talking a little bit earlier, a lot of close games that year, including this one. This is a team that very easily could have gone a lot less than 10-2, but it had a great knack for coming up with big plays down the stretch, and because you had big players making big plays, you had a lot of talent on both the offensive and defensive side.
Absolutely, and one of the biggest, Kina Turner, will be joining us later to talk about this game. It was his senior day and a very important day in his playing life and his personal life, and it was a game for the ages. Another thing that kind of gets lost over time is how different college football was back then. There were only 15 bowl games in existence in the 1979 season. It ended up only 4 Big Ten teams got bowl bids. Purdue 7-2 coming into this game, there was very little that was guaranteed.
Yeah, today you get to that magic 6-win plateau, and you know you're going somewhere. In fact, sometimes 5-7 gets into a bowl. But you mentioned only 15 bowls overall, and I believe 10 of them were in attendance at that Michigan-Purdue game, which featured 2 top 15 teams. And, you know, it was interesting because at 7-2, if Purdue loses its last 2 games and goes 7-4, it may be on the outside looking in, which seems preposterous these days when we have to beg and plead to get the bowl schedule filled. But very important games, and Michigan was also playing for a chance to win the Big Ten championship. If they beat Purdue and then upset Ohio State the last week of the season, they were going back to the Rose Bowl.
And technically, the Big Ten title was still on the table for Purdue, despite stubbing their toe at Minnesota back in early October. They needed some help. It was out of their hands. Right. Ohio State was number 1 or 2 in the country for the last month of the season. So both teams needed Ohio State to lose. Michigan held, their own destiny with that final game against Ohio State, ended up losing to them as well. So the Buckeyes went to the Rose Bowl. But yeah, Purdue everywhere from could be Big Ten champs to could be out of the postseason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Depending on
with 2 weeks left
with
of the season.
2 weeks, right? Yeah. And one of the best teams in school history. Top 10 Michigan, like I said, they skidded at the end of the year. But it was a Bo Schembechler team in the late 70s. You knew that this was bound to be a great game.
You know, back in those days, of course, we had 10 teams in the Big Ten at that point, and it was still, frankly, the Big 2 and the Little 8. It was Ohio State and Michigan and everybody else. Now, the gap closed a little bit. Purdue was one of the teams that really picked up over that time period. But I can tell you the year before, in 1978, Purdue had beaten Ohio State at Ross-Ade Stadium. I remember the Wipe Woody toilet paper. They actually put Woody Hayes' picture on toilet paper and distributed around the stadium. Bo Schembechler, equally despised among the Boilermaker fans. And so there was a lot riding and a lot of emotion coming into that senior day at Ross-Ade.
Let's go ahead and get to the game. It was cold that day. Temps in the low 30s. It's mid-November in Indiana. What do you want?
Sure.
But still, that made for, sometimes the weather does affect the way the game goes. It didn't really affect the Boilermakers from the get-go. They got on the board first, a sustained drive, 13 plays, 65 yards before Benny McCall puts it in from 2 yards out, and Purdue goes up 7-0 early in the first.
And it was the first half, Corey, that the Boilermakers dominated. They came up with a bunch of takeaways in that game. Unfortunately, couldn't put points on the board, had some turnovers of their own. And even though they were absolutely throttling Michigan in the first half, they go into the locker room ahead just 7-0.
Yeah, the Wolverines had 67 yards of offense in the first half, which is kind of amazing to think about on top of the, 3 turnovers in the first half, plus a blocked punt. Purdue had a field goal partially blocked as well, which didn't help matters. But, I would imagine that locker room at the halftime break was kind of disheartening for the team in the respect that we're kicking the tar out of this team. How are we only up 7-0?
And you always wonder, a team like a Michigan or Ohio State, at some point they're going to wake up, and you hope that alarm clock doesn't go off. And for Purdue in the second half, they continued to dominate and then built a lead up. It got up to 24-6 at one point in the fourth quarter.
It did, thanks in part to a Mark Herman rushing touchdown. Yeah, you heard that correct. That is, he had 2 of them to that point in his career, which, given his absolute.
Mark was not a sprinting champ. Great quarterback, great thrower, but not a sprinting champion.
He had good length.
Yeah.
But not a ton of speed. Why run it when you can throw the ball as well as he could? And plus, like he pointed out to us in a conversation last episode, he was starting 8 or 9 yards deep on a lot of those shotgun snaps. So, you're not running very, very effectively from that deep. But like you said, the Boilermakers built up a lead, kept dominating Michigan into the fourth quarter, about a little over 10 minutes left, and the Wolverines finally woke up.
Yeah, I remember, again, being at the game that day, and not only was everybody surprised and excited that Purdue was winning, but dominating Michigan's 24-6. You're thinking, this is going to be a blowout. This is great. And all of a sudden, just like anytime you start to think that in a game, it starts to flip, and it flipped really fast.
It did. The Wolverines got a big kickoff return from Anthony Carter, who went on to a phenomenal career. This was very early in his career, but he was one of the all-time greats for the Wolverines and beyond. They turned that into quick points. They
missed the 2, so it was 24-12.
They missed 24-12 because they had missed a PAT off the upright when they scored in the third quarter. Then the Boilermakers give them the ball right back, and the Wolverines go down the field again in short order, and all of a sudden, like you said, it's 24-19. They went for one that time because it didn't matter.
Right.
So it's 24-19, and everybody in the stadium is just stunned.
Yeah, and then the pressure goes on the Purdue offense. Can you move the football? And the Boilermakers got up near midfield, and Mark Herman, who didn't have a lot of yards that day, 140 passing yards, made his only mistake of the day, tried to throw a quick pass to the right side, and the linebacker jumped up, tipped it, and brought it down, took it into Purdue territory, and all of a sudden in the stadium, you're looking up and thinking, we could lose this game.
What is going on? Yeah, less than 4 minutes to go at that point, and all the momentum in the world on the side of the Wolverines. There were a handful of guys on the field wearing old gold and black on the defensive side who they stiffened their backs and they just made tackle after tackle.
Well, I mentioned earlier, this was a season that had a lot of close games, but they found a way to come up with wins. And so Michigan gets down. They got a 1st and goal at the 10. After a couple of plays, they get it down to the 2-yard line. It's 4th down, 2 yards away. Michigan scores. They take the lead and probably win the football game because, assuming they make the point, Purdue's going to have to go down and score a touchdown. And they tried a triple option play to the right, and James Looney blew it up, got into the backfield, threw down John Wangler for a huge loss, and then Purdue took an intentional safety because the clock was running. They didn't want to punt from deep in their territory, and then the Boilermakers were able to stop Michigan around midfield to end the game.
On that triple option, like you said, Looney blew it up. But I think every member of that defensive front did their job.
Yeah.
They strung it out. There was maybe a split second where Butch Woolfolk was maybe open for a pitch, but he closed up real quick, and then Wangler had nowhere to go with the ball.
And the ball was sitting on the left hash, as they should have. Michigan ran the play to the right-hand side, the wide side of the field. And, yeah, you mentioned the Boilermakers strung it out really well. Looney got up the field and made a great play, and the fans went home happy on senior day.
They did indeed. Looney had blocked a punt back in the first half, so big day for him. Like we'd mentioned, a big day for Bill Kay.
Big day for the defense. 5 takeaways and a blocked punt and hold Michigan under 260 yards, and yet the game comes down to the final minutes. Sports are crazy.
They are crazy, and it was the defense that made the play again. That era gets remembered a lot for the offense and Herman and the Carmel connection and the running game and Dave Young and Pete Quinn's always talking about how the center's the most important part of that offense, but that defense, man, they answered the bell over and over that season.
And had a tremendous propensity for forcing turnovers and coming up with the same thing happened in the Bluebonnet Bowl. Even though Tennessee had come back to take the lead, Purdue got a late touchdown and then had to come up with a late stand, and they did it. And it was different guys, different weeks. We'll talk a little bit later on with Kina Turner, and I think he'll tell us that there wasn't one guy that the defense was built around. And he was a focal point. Yeah. Believe me, you had to know defensively where Kina Turner was, but there were a lot of guys that could do damage on that football team.
In fact, the Boilermakers held on here, went to IU, won the bucket in a game that was closer than the final score indicated, and then, like you said, the Bluebonnet Bowl to send Keena and his classmates out with a 10-win season. The Boilermakers won their last 7 games of the 79 season, and that's why it's one of the best in school history. We're gonna get right to that conversation with Keena right now, right after this break. Kina Turner, the 4-time Super Bowl champion from the San Francisco 49ers, joins us on Ross-Ade's Greatest Games.
Your Central Indiana Ford dealers are a proud sponsor of Purdue football. Visit your local Central Indiana Ford dealer today.
We're joined now by Kina Turner, one of the all-time great Boilermakers and such a key part of that 1979 season. Keena, that Michigan game, the final home game of the year, actually senior day for you, we were talking off air, what a big game that was for you guys. Just what do you think of when you think of that day?
Oh, wow. I mean, I think just as you mentioned, all of that combined, being my last year, being senior day, the big game and the rivalry that we had with Michigan throughout. And, it always reminded me, Michigan, of my freshman game against them when, they were ranked in the country and we beat them at home. And so obviously to finish up on senior day with them, just a very cool moment. And, in that year we won some games. And so, it all made sense.
Keena, the defense came up with 5 takeaways against Michigan that day, blocked a punt, and held the Wolverines under 260 yards. Aside from the talent, which you had a very talented defense, but schematically, what made the junk defense difficult to play against?
Wow. I think one, it always was the players themselves. We had some horses up front, and Leon Burnett, just did a fabulous job of, allowing that defense to take advantage of the skill that it had, and so, it was nicknamed the junk defense because we did just about everything. And I think the best thing we did was just allow the talent to play, and Marcus Jackson up front, and and obviously Wayne Smith in the secondary, and the linebacker core. So we just had a group of guys that just were really good at moving, and we had a coordinator that set up a scheme that allowed us to take advantage of it.
You had so many players on that team. You kind of never knew who was going to step up and make the big play. In this game, it was kind of Bill K's day with 3 picks, a fumble recovery. But looking at your stat line, you were kind of quiet in that game against Michigan. I know that doesn't always mean you had an ineffective game, right? That's part of your job, is to help free other guys to do their jobs as well. But that kind of had to be a strength of the defense. You never knew who was going to step up.
No, for sure. And I'll say it again. I just think Leon really did a nice job of taking the talent and putting us all in positions that allowed us to take the most advantage of it. And we were a pressure defense, so we were coming, it was all about penetration up front. The secondary, had guys that had, Bill Kay was probably the fastest guy on the team. And so, we had athletes at skill positions, and we stayed, in an aggressive mode and an aggressive style.
You look at that day, Keena, you were up 24-6 with about 10 minutes left. I remember sitting in the stands that day, and we were all talking and excited. Not only are we beating Michigan, we're beating Michigan up. Well, that was probably a bad thought to have, because all of a sudden, everything turned. They got it down to 24-21, and they're inside your 10. They're at your 2-yard line with a chance to win the game. Do you remember that last series very much, and the big play that James Looney made at the end?
Yeah, it doesn't stick out completely for me, but for sure, I think what was good about those teams and what we learned along the way was just, in those pressure situations, to be able to stay calm and look to make big plays. And I think that was a part of kind of what, those defenses became for us, is that we, not relied on big plays, but had confidence that we could make plays in key moments to have some success.
How big of a deal was it for you guys at the time to beat Michigan, to beat, a top 10 ranked Michigan team the same year that you beat a top 5 ranked Notre Dame team? Was it really kind of nice to see everything sort of come to fruition to what you thought you could be, and then finally to do it on the national stage?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously my first 2 years at Purdue, we didn't have as much success. My junior and senior year, we were able to put some, really good seasons together. And I think, for me, I was proud of kind of where the program was, when I left, and that we had great success. Jim Young had done a wonderful job coming in. I was brought in by Alex Agassi, and and Alex was only there my freshman year. I think we went 5-6, my first couple years. And so, to have that success in my junior and senior year and see the program, really, be able to play with the big boys, like Michigan and Ohio State, in my junior and senior year, was just a great accomplishment, and you felt good about where the program was.
It's easy for people to forget, because we have so many bowls today, that back, you look at your record going into that game, Keena, you were 7-2. If you lose to Michigan and if you lose to Indiana and finish 7-4, there's no guarantee you're going to a bowl game. Did the team feel any pressure because of that, other than the fact that you wanted to win your senior day and you also always want to win the bucket?
Yeah, I don't know that it was pressure. I think we were having fun, that we were having some success. And, like I mentioned, coming off those, my freshman and sophomore years of just having the program, going through some changeover. I think we had a lot of confidence, as young players, feeling like we had a good team, feeling like we had a real good kind of philosophy of football and what we like to do. Jim wanted to throw the ball. We had the best quarterback in the country. We had Dave Young at tight end, so we had players, and I think we were excited about the moments that came along with that. So I don't know that we had, been in enough situations to feel pressure. I think we were just excited about where we were at the moment. And just the opportunity at hand, and playing against a Michigan, which, I think, you're used to playing against Michigan and Ohio State, Notre Dame, because they were there on the schedule every year. But we hadn't had the kind of success, that we wanted, and to have the opportunity to beat those clubs at those times was hugely important.
Well, like you said, importantly, you got that win against Michigan, and you took care of Indiana, got that Blue Bonnet Bowl bid down in Houston, and then took care of the Volunteers as well. That final game of your college career, again, it was one that came down to the wire. You guys put the fans on edge a lot that season, coming down in the fourth quarter. But just take us back to the Alamo Dome, and the Astrodome,
the other dome,
the eighth wonder of the world, the Astrodome, and just what that final game was like for your college career.
Well, I mean, again, having the success the year before in the Peach Bowl against Georgia Tech, I think we felt like a good team. I think we felt like a team that had been through it a bit. We didn't panic. I think on defense, we felt like we had a quarterback that could win a game, win a tight game, win any kind of game that we needed, and we had those weapons on the offensive side. And so, I think for us, it was just staying in the moment. We gave up some plays that made it a tight game. They were a darn good football team to start out with. And so, being able to, play a complete game, responding to the moment, and obviously winning close ones like that was just, I felt an immense amount of pride, about the way we, handled those last couple of years.
I'm looking over your shoulder, Keena, and seeing the picture of Joe Montana and Bill Walsh. After your life at Purdue, you carved out a new career in the National Football League and a new name for yourself as a member of, 4 Super Bowl champions, right? 4 rings?
Yeah, only 4.
Only
That's how I say it. Should be 6. See, it should be 6 because, I lost a couple NFC championship games that we shouldn't have lost.
See, that's why the competitive guys are the way they are. What did you take out of that whole 49ers experience? And now I'll ask the same question, and I know a lot of it's going to be, you're going to tell me it was talent, but why were the 49ers so great over such a long period of time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, it starts, number one, with I was very lucky, fortunate to play. I went from Mark Herman to Joe Montana, 2 guys that I have immense amount of respect for, and the quarterbacks that they were, the leaders that they were, and the men that they were. And so, for me, when I walked in the door, Joe was drafted the year before me. And if you remember, that Notre Dame game, he was the 3rd string quarterback in our game. And, by the end of the game, he was playing. The 1st string guy came in, he went out, wasn't playing well. 2nd string guy for Notre Dame comes in. I think we break his collarbone maybe. And they put the 1st string guy back in. And finally, somewhere in the 3rd quarter, they look down there and say, okay, we got to put Joe in, and the rest is history, right? So when I walked in the door at the Niners, I knew who he was, right? I knew what he was capable of. It took a while maybe for him to get established with the Niners, but once he did, we took off. And, just like in college, we had a leader in Bill Walsh, like Jim Young, who knew what he wanted, knew the philosophy and style of play that he wanted on offense, and knew the type of people that he wanted to put together in the locker room that really makes the difference, right? And so for sure it was about a lot of talent. I played with a number of Hall of Famers, but it really was about the human connection in the environment that Bill established that really, I think set us up to have some success over many years. And I think, a lot of that was in his attitude about never being satisfied. It was never enough. We just had guys that, were in that locker room that looked at it that way, and a lot of the way we kind of, learned it helped us there, right? We won a Super Bowl in my 2nd year. We didn't make the playoffs the next year. We stumbled in the NFC Championship game the year after, and then we won it again in my 4th year. And those early years really helped us establish kind of an attitude about every year being, singular, and only that year matters. How far you get, it doesn't matter what happens the next year. You have to prove it every year. And so it helped us establish an attitude and a mindset that stuck with us for many years to come.
Keena, I was a Dolphins fan growing up, so I didn't like you guys very much. But you were always a lot of fun to watch. One interesting thing I never thought about till you were just talking now, Here at Purdue, you were a really important part on kind of a no-name defense because the offense got all the attention. In San Francisco, you were a really important part of a defense that gave a lot of the attention to the offense. It was Walsh's West Coast offense and Montana and Rice and Taylor and all the names that Roger Craig and you guys on defense just went about your job. Was that sort of an overarching attitude for the defenses you played on? Is we don't really care who gets the headlines, we just want the wins?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that was a part of who we were. I mean, our biggest stars. I mean, obviously Joe was our guy, and Joe was he was Joe in the locker room. He didn't separate himself from the guys. It was about the team. Our great players were that way. I played with Ronnie Lott and Fred Dean and Charles Haley, all these guys that were Hall of Famers themselves. And it was really about the team, and it was about us, and it was about ultimately the bigger prize, And so I think that was kind of a part of kind of just who we were individually. I think that had a lot to do with, Bill identifying the right kind of people to put together, along with the talent that was necessary to be successful in the business. And so, I think it was a part of who we were, and for sure it was definitely a part of how Bill kind of managed the team.
You became a Niner for life. After your playing days were done, you've stayed with the organization. Tell folks what you're doing now and what you've done since you've ended your playing career.
Well, I've gone off on a couple different tracks, but they've all led back, to the 49ers. This is actually kind of the third time that I've, been back with the team. I've been back this time around maybe, 16 or 17 years or so. Just very fortunate to, have worked with some really, really good people. This is my sixth head coach since I've been back. So we've kind of gone around a bit, but Kyle and John have been wonderful. They both have history with the Niners. I actually met John when I was out doing my only coaching stint at Stanford. We came in, and it was actually John's senior year, and he was good. He had gotten drafted to play baseball, and Bill had the conversation with him. He said, I think you'll be a really good baseball player, but I think I think you'll be a great football player. And so John made the decision to come back his fifth year. We went, I think, 10-3 at Stanford our first year there. We're co-champs of Pac-10, won a bowl game against Penn State. And for John, the rest is history, that he went on and had a Hall of Fame career. And so when he came back, as a part of the combination, he and Kyle, we had that relationship, which has been wonderful. And Kyle had his own history with the 49ers, that his dad was, the offensive coordinator here for the 94 Super Bowl. So they both were rooted kind of in some Niner history, I think, that helped them understand this place, this environment, this ownership. And that's been key in them establishing kind of who we want to be now. And so for me, it's been great to, have had these experiences and been able to come back home, so to speak, and played my whole 11 years here and have worked here for a number of years. It's definitely felt like home.
So important for a Midwestern guy like yourself to feel at home, right?
Yeah, well, for sure. Nothing like the Midwest and the fan base there and the attitude about the ball, but winning can help it all, for sure.
For sure.
You also, and Keena, you've always had a special connection with Purdue, and that got even more special a couple of years ago. Are you able to share something with your daughter that was very special? Talk about that.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's probably my biggest memory, most exciting time at Purdue, with all of the football and with all the the winning we were able to do those last couple of years and all the great relationships there and friendships. Having the opportunity to go back and spend that day with my daughter and walk and complete my degree at Purdue after 40 years and be there on her very special day was just the coolest moment and experience that I'll always cherish. And I want to, thank Purdue for allowing that to happen and creating an opportunity for it to happen. And it's a very cool moment.
There's not a lot of great things that came out of COVID, as I'm sure we can all agree worldwide. But one of the cool things that happened was for the first time, graduation was held in Ross-Ade Stadium, and so when you were able to walk, in a place you were very familiar with, where you had a lot of memories, and it had to be just so cool to add one more.
Yeah, I mean, there were moments where it was overwhelming, to think about, the times I had spent in that stadium and how important those Saturdays were. And to be walking on the same field that I, lined up with some of my best friends and, relationships and friendships that I have to this day, to then have my daughter kind of be a part of that memory for me in that way was just incredible, And so, there was some concern that we might not have a physical graduation because of COVID. It all lined up. I finished my classes that I needed to finish in time. I mean, it all kind of just worked out, and what an amazing experience.
You look back, Keena, for those of us who were there, and I was in school a couple of years behind you, but I was in the stands for those 78 and 79 seasons. That run from 78 really to 80 might be the most successful 3-year run, or certainly one of those in program history. What do you hope people remember from that team and that group of guys years and years later?
Well, I think, and probably all teams that have a measure of success will say the same kinds of things, that, it was a unique time that we brought together the talent level, the leadership level, and the scheme and the approach of, a collection of folks that came together and were fixated and had the same mindset about where you want to be, and that run represents, a great time in Purdue history, sports history. And so, I think, a lot of things have to work out for you to have those opportunities. And, Purdue has a lot of success, stories throughout the sports programs there. And for me, it's just great to be a part of, a moment in our sports history that, that will live on in some way.
Well, Keena, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll cut you free and let you get back to work. I'm sure the 49ers want to get every little bit they can out of you today. So thank you again. It's been a lot of fun walking down memory lane with you.
I appreciate you guys. And, one thing I found about winning Super Bowls in the ring, you never get enough of them. So we're going to attack it and go after one more.
Sounds good. We'll be cheering you on. No matter who we might be pulling for, we'll always be pulling for you.
I appreciate you guys. Thanks now. Boiler up.
Boiler up.